Hi everyone, it's Dr. RAMANI. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, healing from narcissistic abuse, and just toxic in general. So, one of the things I've been hearing more and more is that you shouldn't call people narcissistic, you shouldn't call relationships toxic, and that in fact, we should be repeating ourselves to make sure we're heard clearly. So, here's my riddle for today. How many times are you supposed to repeat yourself to get a narcissistic person to understand you? I actually don't know the answer to this riddle, so if any of you know the punchline, please, for my sake, drop it in the comments. Listen, some of the conventional wisdom on boundaries is that other people can't guess your boundaries, and that's true. And so we not only have to make them clear, but we may need to repeat them. I absolutely agree with the idea that we cannot expect our boundaries to be guessed. If anyone initially encroaches on our boundaries, we are responsible for ensuring that we make ourselves clear and communicate clearly if we're uncomfortable or if we need things to be sort of reworked. The challenge is that this is easier said than done. If a person has a history of trauma, a narcissistic family member has been shamed for having needs, especially during childhood, certain cultural issues, all of these things can play a role in making boundary setting really difficult. It's hard to engage in that sort of boundary setting vocabulary when a person approaches boundary setting with fears of abandonment, of being shamed, of rage, or simply being taught or told or believing that you have no right to set a boundary, or that you believe that you could do it. But let's say you do set it, whatever it is, you use the language. You say, these are the times you can call me, these are the times you can't, or how a person can physically approach you. The fact is, if this is a relationship with a narcissistic person, your entire process of setting boundaries will be invalidated and shamed again and again. You may be gaslighted, you may be mocked, you might be treated with contempt. And I'd be curious, and again, drop this in the comments too, what has happened when you have attempted to set boundaries with a narcissistic person? I'm just curious, because I got to tell you, in general, it has not worked for me. So I'll share here what I have witnessed in people who have attempted to set boundaries with a narcissistic person. And these are people I've talked with, worked with, and I'll even share stuff that's happened to me. So first, if you try to set boundaries with a narcissistic person, you will be laughed at and written off with contempt. Oh, they'll say things like, oh, your boundary? Okay, please. I'll honor your boundary, little Miss Rigid. Number two, you'll literally not be listened to, and seemingly out of spite, the narcissistic person will just keep violating the boundary. Number three, you can expect to be pathologized and gaslighted for setting the boundary. They'll say like, oh, do you have OCD or something? Is that why you're like this? Like, chill out. Or to be told, I never heard you say that that was an issue for you. Number four would be to be met with rage. F you and your effing boundary, just shut the F up. Number five, to have the narcissistic person with whom the boundary was set to say, I guess you really don't love me. I'm never going to talk to you again. Or number six, to have been told, one person tried to set a boundary and was told by a judge that she was being too rigid. Number seven, to be told by a family that that's just nonsense American talk. We're family. We don't do this. It's disrespectful to your family. We can do anything together. Please, oh please, add to this list of what has happened to you when you've set a boundary with a narcissistic person. So if the prevailing wisdom is that you should keep repeating this, that feels like masochism to me. How many times would you set yourself up for this? How much time should you spend on trying to understand how to meet a narcissistic person where they are at so they'll respect your boundary? I sometimes wonder if the people who are giving out guidance and advice might actually be afraid of the narcissistic people. And that's why they say keep repeating yourself. A more cynical take would be that the people giving the advice are narcissistic themselves. But the fact of the matter is asking a person to repeat themselves, the punchline is how many times you repeat yourself. So if you're supposed to repeat yourself, like I said, how many times? How many times is enough times that you are expected to keep communicating with a narcissistic, toxic, or antagonistic person and keep making allowances for them, who, by the way, is not making a single allowance for you, 10 times, 25, a year's worth, 10 years, 50 years, how many times are we supposed to repeat ourselves before they get it? And what if they never do? I'm guessing they probably never will. It seems that there are some who would be content with people experiencing narcissistic abuse to just remain psychological sacrifices, to appease the narcissistic people by not doing something as terrible as forcing them to abide by boundaries, and instead waste our lifetimes trying to get them to honor them. Please do not waste your life trying to exert boundaries with people who do not hear, recognize, empathize, or respect you. There is an old adage in psychology. First time something happens could be a one-off. Second time something happens, a coincidence. Third time something happens, it's a pattern. So, using that, if it's been 3 times, I think you can probably fold on the boundary setting. And stop, please stop, spending your life in subjugation and remediative communication with narcissistic people who will never get it and who will never honor your boundaries. I've been there. I've been in narcissistic relationships that have spanned decades. My boundary setting actually was to the point of exhaustion, and I've watched clients go to the point of exhaustion in seeing it in other people. But after a while, you realize there are no boundaries to set, and that I then have to make peace with myself of saying, if I'm going to stay in this, I have gone to the radically accepting place, but my boundaries will not be honored here. And the hard work I had to do therapeutically was that didn't mean my boundaries were invalid or unreasonable. It meant that I had my own reasons for continuing to talk to this person, whoever they were. They will not value my boundaries. I have people in my life who do. That stacked pancakes of multiple truths are what get us through most of this, and that really matters here. Your boundaries are valid. They're not made invalid by someone who's not willing to honor them, no matter how many damn times you repeat it. Thanks again.